What's the creepiest true story that happened to you or someone you know? Serious. This happened about 3 years ago or so. I was sitting in the kitchen, and it was around 10 PM or so. I heard a really loud thump in the basement. I live alone with 2 dogs, so any sound is somewhat frightening to me. So, as I'm walking down the stairs to the basement, I hear the thumping again, in an oddly rhythmic pattern. I creak open the door into the basement bedroom, and I see my dog is just ramming his head and body into the wall, over and over. I can't explain to you how shockingly unnatural looking it was. It looked like he was controlled or something. I called him over, and he stopped and came upstairs with me. 3 hours later, I hear the thumping again. I get out of bed again. However, when I went down to check it, it was my other dog that was ramming his head into the wall. It was like he was possessed. Scared the cheese out of me. Since then, nothing like that has happened. But what an unexplainable event. Somebody mailed my friend a bunch of pictures of his wife just going about her day. Some of them were taken through windows of their home. Police were called and everything, but nothing ever came of it. They actually moved because of it. I was stalked by a 40-plus-year-old man from the ages of 10 till 14. My parents told me about it when I was 13. I was unaware, but they were. He had been following me to school. He had been mailing me things, taking pictures of me, and sending my parents threatening messages in all sorts of way. I was at a party at my friend Brian's house. I was really uncomfortable because I didn't really know anyone there, and I knew that Brian's friends were really into drugs. I wound up just watching movies and drinking mixed drinks until I fell asleep in a chair. The next morning I was getting a glass of water and getting ready to leave when one of Brian's friends approached me. He asked me if Brian and I hooked up because he had heard so much noise coming from his bedroom. I said no, and he continued to tease me about it. He was being creepy and insulting, so I just left. Later that morning, I found out that Brian had overdosed and died during the night. His friend had heard Brian moaning and thrashing around and thought that he was having sex. I was only 4 when this happened. Was playing outside with my siblings and neighbors, and while they're busy playing, a lady approached me and took me to her place, a nearby neighborhood. After a while, everybody was freaking out and they started looking for me everywhere. This lady was severely depressed. Her husband left her after their son died. He couldn't handle her depression apparently. She took me to her place, fed me and gave me tons of candy for a couple days. She also made me wear her deceased son pajamas. At some point, she took me to buy some candy from the store. The store owner knew her, so he reported that to the police. She didn't hurt me at all. The doctor even said I was well fed. I always think of her and pray she's in a better place now. Even tried to go visit her when I was a college student. Her house was sold and she moved away apparently. Context: my mom's college boyfriend became her stalker after she left his awful, abusive ass back in the mid-80s. Several years ago, just before the last Harry Potter movie came out, my mom and I were marathoning the other 7 movies, and at about 1 AM the phone rings. Normally we don't answer. We figure if it's important they'll leave a message. But a call that late at night is probably urgent. Mom answers and almost immediately her face changes and she tells me, "LVHQ, go wake up your father." I've never seen my mom this scared. I run upstairs and get him. Back downstairs she's still on the phone and I have no idea what's going on. Dad has some words with the caller and we hug it out in the kitchen. This is when I found out my mom had a stalker, despite him being silent for years, and their whole breakup happening halfway across the country. He somehow found us, said he'd driven by our house, complimented the neighborhood. Freaks me out to this day, wondering how much he knows about us, and if I've ever talked to him unwittingly. Edit. Formatting. I've posted this before. Staying in a motel with my wife one night. She falls asleep really quickly, but for me it takes a while to drift off to sleep. So I'm lying there in the dark for a while and I distinctly hear a voice coming from somewhere in the room quietly, though just above a whisper, say, "I think they're asleep now." Immediate fright response. I bolt out of bed, turn on all the lights and start frantically searching the room. I look in the bathroom behind the shower curtain, under the bed. Nothing. It's a 1-room motel room. The door is bolted shut. There's nobody else in the room. My wife is now freaked because of my actions. What I experienced is called a hypnagogic hallucination, and not an uncommon experience during the initial stages of sleep. But if I had not known what that was, I would have thought the room was haunted. Friend was sleeping at home during summer when his housemates were away. He slept with the bedroom door open, which is horrifying enough, but woke up when he heard burglars walking up the stairs. He didn't do anything and just laid there terrified, and one of them closed the bedroom door. When they left, he found a knife in the kitchen that didn't belong to anyone in the house. Mom walking through house with a realtor. 3-year-old me in tow. Realtor mentions that the house used to be an orphanage. Mom loves old houses. This one had plenty of rooms and old house winess. About 15 minutes in, 3-year-old me kept asking, "Where'd that little boy go?" Too spooky for mom. Edit. Removed an extra word. More funny than creepy, but definitely some creep in there, and it's one of my favorite stories to tell. So a few years ago I was an Uber driver to help pay for a vacation, and one night I pick up some people at a comedy club. They were actually that night's entertainment. 2 guys and a girl, and they wanted to go to a strip club that was out a ways. Now, driving these guys around was pretty great. I felt like a cab driver in a sitcom because that's how these guys were talking. So rapidly and a fair amount of quips. But eventually I realized where we were didn't seem right. My GPS gets us to the address, and really, the only way to describe this remote location we've arrived at around 2 AM is a murder warehouse. Now, I honestly don't know who was more frightened there for a moment, me, having driven 3 people to this address they gave me in the middle of the night, or them having been driven to the wrong place in the middle of nowhere. Thankfully some quick googling showed that the correct address was just a mile or 2 down the street. Everyone got there fine, and they even tipped me with tickets to next week's show at the comedy club. So, about 3 years ago during summer I had a habit of staying up late playing games with my window open. This usually wasn't a problem as my neighborhood was usually quiet. However, one night someone knocked on my window around midnight. When I went over to investigate, I heard someone calling out for help in Spanish. My family was up and I assumed it was one of my neighbors. So I went outside. Once I saw the person, I immediately knew something was off course. 1. This wasn't one of my neighbors, and 2. This person's clothing was ripped and they didn't have shoes on. Turns out the person was a she. I thought it was a young boy at first, and she only spoke Spanish. I tried communicating with my basic Spanish skills to no avail. Eventually I went inside to ask my parents for help. We ended up calling my uncle, who was fluent in Spanish. He helped translate and told us that she said she was being human trafficked from Honduras and needed help. He wanted either $500 or a car to LA. We couldn't give either and offered to call the police, but she seemed adamant that the police didn't get involved. After this bombshell, my family went inside and decided to just call the police. After making this decision, we wanted to check up on her at least. But as my mom and I were walking outside, we saw a car with no headlights pull onto our street. We immediately noped back inside. Once we felt that the coast was clear, we went back out and the lady was gone. We called the cops and filed a report, but we never heard anything more. When I was 19, I was visiting my grandmother in Indiana. Unfortunately, she ended up in the hospital, so my mom and I took turns staying with her. One morning I was sleeping at my grandmother's house when I woke up to her front storm door slamming. I sat up and realized there was a chair next to me that wasn't there the night before. I got up and went to the front door. The main actual door was wide open and only the storm door was closed. A man was walking across the lawn, his back to me. Normal walking. For some reason I wasn't afraid. I also wasn't wearing my glasses, so I kind of assumed this guy was a postal worker. I didn't put the chair by the bed thing together until later, when the toilet seat slammed down and scared it out of me. But why was the toilet seat up? I'm a girl. My mom's a girl. TLDR, some random dude peed in my grandmother's house and watched me sleep maybe. This happened to my father. I will tell the story the way he told me to better the story. I was 22 years old. I had just gotten a place closer to my new job, but the neighborhood I lived in was secluded. Maybe 4 houses within a mile. Nothing for miles after that. I was having a normal night. Maybe my first week there. I watched some TV and fell asleep. When I woke up around 1 AM, I was about to go to my bedroom when I remembered to turn off the bathroom light at the opposite end of the house. As I was walking through the living room, I could barely see through to the kitchen and even farther, the dining room. It was pitch black because the bathroom door was closed. In the dining room, however, I saw something tall standing up in the corner. I froze, and as my eyes adjusted, I saw it was an old man or woman in a white gown with white hair. "Hey," I yelled. The old person sprinted towards me like a ducking jet. I sprinted back to my room where the light was on. I put my hands up, ready to fight, and the old person came lunging in, and when they saw me they stopped and said, "Why are you in my house?" I pretended I was leaving and apologized while I eased into the closer bathroom, locked the door, and called 911 with the house phone. Turns out a woman about a half mile away in the neighborhood had a form of dementia and wandered into my house while I was sleeping. Edit. Shout out to Lazy Masquerade for doing this story. Story here. This happened about 9 years ago on the 5th of July. We had some extra fireworks, so we decided to grab a few beers and launch them off. I was living on the north shore of Long Island at the time, and at the end of my road was a 100-foot cliff with stairs to the beach. Along the sides of the cliff there was a trail. On the left side you have 100-foot drop to the beach. On the right, a large state park. There's nothing for a good 4 miles into the park. We finish up with the fireworks at around 3 AM and decide to head back home. Forgot to mention it's just me and my 2 good friends. We're just bulleting, cracking jokes as we walk when we hear some leaves ruffling on our left. We weren't freaked out at first. Big state park with a ton of deer. About 5 minutes later we hear more ruffling. But it's for a longer period and sounds distinctly like someone walking. We stop to listen. But as soon as we stop, the ruffling stops. We were too stupid to bring a flashlight, and this was before flashlights on cell phones, so all we had was the light from the screen. We make it about 50 more feet and all of a sudden we hear the ruffling again. This time it's right on top of us and a man comes out of the woods. It was extremely dark, but we could see that this man was wearing a pinstripe suit, matching top hat, and thin rimmed circular glasses. He just looked at us and said, "Hello, good evening gentlemen." We hauled ass and never looked back. Ran for about 3 minutes before we reached the end of the trail. To this day I have no idea why that man was deep in the woods, alone, in a full ducking suit, at 3 AM. Still gives me chills just typing this story out. Well, this girl I used to be in class with found out today that there's some random dude out there who tattooed a picture of her face on his leg. She doesn't know who he is, just that he tagged her on Instagram with a picture of the tattoo. I'd feel like it's pretty damn creepy to have someone somewhere in the world walk around with your face on his leg. This happened to a friend of mine, and was verified by her sister and girlfriend. The 3 of them were camping in an area in southern Utah. Sorry, I don't remember the exact location. And it was during the fall, early winter, so it got dark very early, around 5 o'clock. When it started getting dark, the 3 of them built a fire and sat around it, just talking and eating. Normal stuff. Everything was fine for a while, but they started to hear this weird chirping noise. She described it to me as a kookaburra call slowed down. They got kind of freaked out at this point because it didn't sound like any regular animal. They also kept noticing rustling movement out of the corners of their eyes but could never see what was making it. After a while they went to bed, and everything was fine until my friend was woken up in the middle of the night to see what looked like hands pressed up against the outside of her tent. And she heard a weird wet breathing sound, like when someone has a stuffy throat and kind of wheezes while breathing. She said she was so scared she couldn't talk, but was able to wake up her sister. They stayed quiet and eventually the handprints kind of just faded away. In the morning they wanted to get the hell out of there, so they started packing up their stuff at sunrise. My friend looked around where the handprints had been, and saw a trail of long, skinny footprints leading up to their campsite, but not away from it. Her and her sister aren't the kind to bullet around, so I believe that this really happened. To this day she's convinced it was a skinwalker. When I was about 8 years old, my neighbor filmed me in secret. I was trying to be a good kid and was helping with the laundry. Our dryer was broken, so we were using a clothesline outside. I was busy hanging up the wet laundry when the neighbor boy yelled to me, "Hey, I would go inside if I were you." What? I was confused. You should go inside. My dad is recording you. I was super confused because when he said recording you I thought he meant with a tape recorder and I wasn't saying anything. Before I could respond, his dad started yelling at him, "Get inside you little ducker before I beat the it out of you." That's when I saw him with his camcorder behind some trees. I didn't know what to do. One of our new kittens ran over to me and started biting my ankles trying to play, so I used that as an excuse to pick it up and go inside. Edit. A lot of people are saying what a bro that kid was, and I agree that really was pretty brave of him. I wonder why he spoke up. If he was being recorded or beat at home, wouldn't he have been too afraid of the ramifications to warn me? On a warm summer night my wife and I were in bed reading with the windows open. After dark, we heard someone nearby shouting loudly, maybe a block away in our residential neighborhood. The words were mostly hard to understand but at least once quite distinctly, "Help me, I'm bleeding, I'm bleeding." After a minute or so it trailed off. I couldn't see anything out any window. My wife really didn't want me to go out to check it out. Both our hearts were pounding like crazy. Obviously someone was hurt, but was there still danger? So I called the local police and explained. In a few minutes a cop car drove by in the direction of the shouting. A few minutes after that I saw a policeman with a flashlight chasing someone across a nearby yard. I checked to make sure all the doors were locked. After that, nothing happened for what felt like a really long time. Finally we called the police back to see what was up. Turns out it was just a local teen, drunk, trying to talk to the neighborhood girl who recently dumped him. At some point, trying to get her attention, he broke a window and cut his hand. When the police showed up, he ran. Because he was drunk and didn't want to get busted. So much less scary than the stories we had been spinning in our heads. Finally we were able to sleep.